Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another exciting episode of Let's Talk Comics, the official Image Comics podcast. I am your host, Jim Viscardi, and if you are new to the show, we're doing things a little differently today, so I'm going to give you the TLDR. This show is a show that talks to comic book creators about their process, how they broke in, why they love comics, all of that jazz. Great inspiration and advice for anyone who is looking to break in themselves, but also a great look at how comics are made for folks who love them. Today's intro is a little bit different. Usually I start with a whole big thing, hyping up the guest and getting you ready into the mindset and all that. But I have to give you a little bit of some insight into how the show is usually made. When I sit down and do these recordings, I usually do a little bit of I do a fake intro. It's an intro that is a much shorter version of the intro I do for the show. And then I tell them like, hey, look, I'm going to say something very similar, but this is just to get us ready and into the mindset. When I did that intro with today's guests, it was almost too perfect. And so I would feel really bad cutting it out. And so I'm going to give it to you that way. So if you're ready, I'm ready. Let's talk comics. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another exciting episode of Let's Talk Comics. I am your host, Jim Viscardi. This is the official Image Comics podcast where we go one-on-one, in this case, 2-on-1, 3-on-1, I don't even know.
Let's call it a threesome.
Let's
call it a threesome.
Creators in comics to talk about how they broke in, why they broke in, and all that stuff. Today, it's going to be a little bit different because like every now and then, there are writers that come around who remind you why we love comics as a medium. These two are people who take wild ideas and make us feel in ways that we haven't. We are going to talk about both of their projects today.
Before they go, those people come on, it's going to be Will and I talking about our comics.
I am really excited.
I can't wait. I can't wait for that show. But until then, we'll keep it warm. Don't worry.
Ladies and gentlemen, my guests today, one Mr. Deniz Camp, the other Will Maxwell Prince. Guys, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
This one's gonna be a fun one. I love both your stuff, obviously, but the thing I really want to talk about today is let me dial back a bit. Will has a completely unique issue of Ice Cream Man coming out. The Mortal Coil comes out this week, and you may find it on a rack. You will probably most likely find it on the top of the counter of your comic shop because it is a card deck, and we're going to get into that a little bit. But first, so cool. I need to know how the two of you guys got to know one another because you guys very clearly have a vibe about you two that is almost like season 2 of the Golden Girls, but I think
I'm Blanche. I call Blanche. I'm Blanche.
God damn it.
but I know, but Deniz, when we spoke, you mentioned how great of friends you were with Will and how like the two of you guys kind of came up together. Yeah. So was that all a lie, or how did who met who first? How did it happen?
No, yeah, it was. I mean, it was. I was a fan of his work. I had read his work, but we met at a New York Comic Con after party, I think. Isn't that right?
Like a rooftop thing, maybe?
It was a rooftop for somewhere. And I had seen him post a couple of times about an author that means a lot to me, named Dennis Johnson. And it's not just because we share a name, although that's like 80% of it. And then and Will is also a big fan, and you don't meet a lot of fans of, or you don't meet a lot of readers of that guy's work necessarily in your day-to-day life. And so we started to bond over that and just a whole background of stuff that we loved, both in comics and out of comics. And I handed him what at the time was a self-published comic book, would have been my second comic book, or at least second comic I tried to produce. And I was like, hey, if you want to read this. And it was like printed on like bad, like whatever bad printer paper that we had, and basically stapled together. And he read it, and he was very sweet about it. And then we just kept having, going out to the bar and hanging out and talking about comics. And Will is the first person to. Will's actually my first book. Image 20th Century Men is all down to Will. He sent it into the offices, and I owe him pretty much my whole career. So it's just that.
So much responsibility.
And he has become the centerpiece of pretty much all of comics, I think, right now. He's writing the best book on the top 3 imprints in publishing, like two corporate, one independent, and he's gotten the best thing.
No, that's not true. But yeah, and so our friendship transcends comics. Like we've especially during the pandemic, I think we really like leaned on each other a lot. And I don't know if I can say this, but we saw a guy get shot outside of my house together.
That's something that truly bonds you.
Yeah. Those were rough. Those were rough years that we got through together. And so, he's one of my favorite people in the world. Yeah.
I think you were at the driver's side window of my car. I was probably
because we were still distancing.
I was crying. I think about something. Like teary-eyed, not crying, but like I was just like, yeah, man, this is really getting tough. And then we just we heard a pop and saw a guy, I think in red sweatpants, like just running.
Damn.
And then we said, all right, I think it's time to go. I think it's time to end this conversation.
Yeah. He was okay. He turned out to be okay. Just a FYI.
Me? I didn't.
Us, on the other hand, we were the real victims there for sure.
No, yeah. So yeah, we met at that party. For my part, I already have like a lot of very close friends. As an adult, I'm not really there looking to make new friends. But Deniz, he just kind of spoke my language. He's smart. You could talk to him for hours. We have a lot of overlapping interests and concerns. He's incredibly articulate, especially off the cuff, which I am not so much of the time. And so, like, just to hear him speak was really fascinating to me. And so we kind of had like a loose friendship. And then, like, over time, over the pandemic, one of my best friends in the world. And I really look up to him as a writer. And once I read that little ash can that he had given me at that party, I was like, it is my mission to make sure that this dude breaks in, which is always such funny verbiage because like it makes us like criminals. Like we're we've got a crowbar and you've got but it's kind of the way you got to do it.
Pulling off a career heist.
Yeah. You have to perform some criminal act, not murder.
Was there
not ruling murder out though as an option? Yeah. There's probably some way to make it work.
Yeah,
was there something like that for you? Wait, in like the early part for you, or you just
no? And boy, did I need it.
You had a friend who took you to parties, but all it did was give you food poisoning from bad sushi, right? Like,
right? That was like the peak of my experience of trying to schmooze outside of just my word processor. I went to this party for this publisher. They had like a free sushi buffet. And on the ride to the party, I was with like the CEO of the publisher, who I don't know if they exist anymore.
They do, and they've stolen a lot of IP. So they
and he was talking about like he's one of those like LA guys like bragging about like hookers in Mexico, and I was like, you're not really impressing me, man. You kind of sound like a jerk.
This
then
is
I
the
went.
only, by the way, this is the only image podcast I'm pretty sure that's going to have hookers in Mexico as part of it. So let's just take a moment to enjoy that. So really respect that.
I ate the sushi, and there are two types of food poisoning. Fish related food poisoning you can get. One typical sort of bacteria related.
Usually, what you get
not
when you
cooked.
get like gas station sushi.
Right. And then there's the thing where the fish was sick.
Oh.
And you're actually
You
getting
got red tide poisoning.
you're actually getting like the bacteria that made the fish ill does have some crossover effect on the human body. And so I got so sick. I mean, it was comical, the effects for like 5 days.
And that's how you break into comics.
That's how I broke in. No,
They felt so bad.
Our stories are different. I didn't have a dude. I had kind of the opposite. I had a lot of like, I had a lot of
saboteurs,
people that I was like, oh, this is not the way I want to do it. And so it was like, I'm going to try a different way and do it maybe on my terms and not these terms. And
right.
Yeah, I mean, Will really, not to interrupt, but like Will, it's very odd because Will and my wife both like believed in my work way more than I did, way earlier, and I think both were pretty wrong, like at the time. But I hope it's turned out okay. Like I hope it's turned out for the best. But like at the time, it was not earned at all. So,
yeah, I was my big thing, my like informative experience was certain popular artists who hasn't had anything come out recently that I know of. Is very, very for a while. Drew some DC books, drew some indie books. I think he drew an image book. I'm not sure. He lived in Brooklyn. I was actually on the Upper West Side at the time, not in Brooklyn. And his wife owned a coffee shop in Brooklyn that I actually now has turned into like a tea shop. That it's been that way for like since my daughter was born, and we don't go there often anymore, but they still remember us, and like they remember my daughter as a baby. And they're like, oh my God, every time we come in, like she's got so big. They're really good people. But so at the time though, it wasn't this tea shop. It was this coffee shop owned by the wife of a very, very famous comics artist who was putting on an exhibit of his pages of his original art, the coffee shop, on a night where New York had a terrible snowstorm. Like 12 inches, like, you're trudging like literally up to your thighs. And I was very far away from this event, but it was, for some reason, it was just like, I'm gonna go, it's a Friday or Saturday, or maybe it was even a weekday. There was nothing to do. I took, this long subway trip, and then like trudged in the snow to this coffee shop, and there was pretty much no one there except the artist, his wife, and the two friends of the guy. And I, like Deniz at the time, I had my little ash cans with me, trying to self-publish and get the word out. And one of the friends, basically, I like walked around, looked at the art in this empty coffee house, and then sat with the only people there, which were the artist and his crew. And one of them was like paging through my ash can and didn't realize that I had brought it, and was like, "Oh, God, like what is this? This person's fucking terrible." And
did you say it's mine?
Yeah, I was like, yeah. Well, that's very good feedback. Thank you.
You're being a real white knight by not mentioning the artist's name. That's lovely.
It's fine. This is going to become like, I guess this is going to become the equivalent of one of those like reality TV shows where people on the internet try and like.
Well, I just gave them a big hint, but but I will say that experience is like really, really common in comics, unfortunately, or in any creative industry, I guess. Because before Will, that was my universal experience as well, and I have exactly that story from, not universal. That's not true. Some people are nice, some people are polite, but then there's just like some people who are really dicks about it. And one guy accused me of, and this is a big who's since been disgraced, but was a big artist and writer. And he was just like, "Oh, did you use Mexican migrant labor to draw this or something like that?" It was you get that a lot in comics for people who are really not welcoming, unfortunately, and also you get the opposite, like Will, but
Right.
it's one of those things where you just gotta don't take it too seriously. Those people usually turn out to be disgraced in some way, as both of these artists that we're talking about in some way have been kind of discredited over time.
The karma effect.
For me, that experience, the karmic kind of stuff, I was just like, if I'm ever in the position to be this guy, where like people are coming in the snow to see my stuff, like, and that's how much people might like my work. If I ever get to someplace close to that, or even someplace far away from that someday, that I will be the opposite of that and read the ash can and be engaged and actually try to be helpful and human to the person who's put a lot of work into this thing that they're trying to share with you. And so, yeah, when he gave me the ash can at the party, a lot of people pocket this stuff and then toss it in the garbage on their way home. But I still, to this day, I read every one that I get from anybody that gives me anything. So,
love it. Beautiful relationship is born. All right, well, let's talk about a little bit about your work, because between what you're doing in Ice Cream Man, and Deniz, what you're doing in Assorted Crisis Events, Deniz, I know when we spoke, you had mentioned that like some of the structure of the series, you wanted to kind of be a little similar in the way that you wanted to tackle ideas, and but I think one of the things that you guys do, both of you do so incredibly well, is the way you guys look at like the human condition, I guess, right? Where whether it be weird or tragic or even heartwarming in a sense, right? Like what keeps you coming back to that space? What is it about those feelings that you feel is like the most fertile ground for storytelling?
Well,
I mean, for me, what brings me back to center is often Deniz. But I don't know. I mean, I think if you're a certain type of person, you have a sensitivity to the world, what's going on, other people. You're sort of looking at not a small picture, but a very broad picture, and you can't not be sort of hit in the face with a variety of emotions about it. So I think we both had that sensitivity where it's we both live lives that have their complexity, like our personal lives, and then also look at the world and see awful things and feel just despair for people that and then we feel embarrassed for complaining about our sort of golden cup issues. We both live in Brooklyn. We both wives. If we get to write comics for a career, it's a very
Blessed.
little existence. But I think we're both just tuned in to how hard it is to be a person, both in a situation like ours where things are relatively stable, and then in a situation we've both been around people or maybe have been the people where it's a lot less stable and a lot less privileged. So it's just like a frequency sort of thing, I think, that we both share.
Yeah, I think for me and for Will, I think, not to speak for Will, but I think this is one of the reasons we're friends is we don't see weakness as a bad thing. I think people are at their most beautiful when they're at their lowest or at their most vulnerable, because they're their most themselves, and so to put that into the work, and to share, our frustration with, but also our love of of humanity, of the, and respect for the interior life. You know, there's this thing, that this truth that every person that you meet on the street has an interior life as rich and as deep as yours. And that is unfathomable for us, like as these bags of meat. Like, it's just like, naturally you cannot think that every day, every minute of every day. It's just not possible to think that person walking by is as rich and deep as you are. But it's true. And so the work that we do is I think is our way of getting to that place, is recognizing that and experiencing that and feeling that. And so for me, it's as much, it's as much an exercise, like an empathy exercise. Like, it makes, I think, writing these stories in this way makes me have empathy and sympathy for the people around me, and more, because I put myself in those shoes. And I think that's one of the beautiful things that art does, is that it can strike a chord that already exists in you, but it can also kind of expand your horizons, and make you more empathetic to the world around you. And I think that's a big part of the project. So
when
that issue with consciousness, it is just, by definition, totally egocentric. Like, we are all the stars of the movie in our heads. We are unable to not think that way. Life is happening to you. Anything that
in the body,
anything that goes on, in your immediate area is something that occurs to you. Though you find that, like, vulnerability and weakness, both in humility of self, and also kind of weaving it into your art, into characters or into discussion, helps sort of bridge that gap of consciousness, and, like, really connect with people. Like, oh yeah, it hurts. I feel that way too. When I'm, when it's gray outside, like, I get a little depressed as well. Or, like, oh my God, like, it really hurts to lose someone. And so getting to places of what weakness or vulnerability or whatever you kind of want to call that, I feel like is a big bridge of consciousness jumping. And that's, like, I think what we were both able to access was, like, how can I, through the medium of comics, which itself is very unique, how can I talk to the reader in a way where there's actually a discussion going on?
And something that I admire about Will's work in particular is how vulnerable he is. I mean, his work is really working through stuff on the page in a way that, like, and is honest in a way that frightens me sometimes.
So that's kind of my question. Where, like, when you guys are sitting down to write, is it are you just trying to make sense of the world, or kind of cope with it?
I mean, Will should answer first. I think he has probably I see Will, and I know him as a person, and so I see him really, and he's described it to me as, like, working through stuff in his life on the page often. That doesn't mean everything's literal or whatever, but, like, there is a vulnerability to his work that I think is, and an honesty, like a transparency to his work, that I think is very beautiful, and is what makes it so special, and is also really scary for me to do. Would be very scary for me to do, because there's obviously there's layers of artifice, and there's layers of distance, and there's all this stuff that we put in there. It's not Will's life, but it's also, it is some of the stuff that he deals with is pretty right in the moment, right to the bone. And I think that's what is part of what gives it, I mean, besides his craft and all that, but it's part of what it gives it this special energy. Like, he'll put in names, and then he'll try to change the names, and then he'll be like, no, I have to put in the real name because it's not, because it loses some kind of special fire or magic. And like, that for me is, like, next level of artistry to me.
Well, Will, how do you top that answer?
He is very kind. Yeah, I mean, the layers of artifice, it's kind of a spectrum. And Dennis is one of the few
spectrum.
Oh,
perhaps. Sorry, go ahead.
Good book. Not, it's fine, but
So he caught himself complimenting himself, and he couldn't handle it. Sorry, go ahead.
It's the book that was worked on with earnesty,
Ernest goes
and
to Ernest.
earnestness. Anyway, the layers of artifice, at least in Ice Cream Man, sort of oscillate. And Dennis is one of the few people who is kind of privy to how close or to how far away any given one shot is to real life. Mhm. And sometimes I've hewed very close, and it's almost just a word for word sort of on something that has happened or transpired, and then other times it'll be something that is I can't. It's too raw to be that close to it, and so you have to put in these distance layers, or it's to communicate what you want to communicate. You kind of craft story around the idea, and the layers to sort of create themselves. And it's just, yeah. If you, I at least start with like, what am I thinking about, and how I feel today with almost every single page one, panel one that I write. So,
Well, I think like both of you use kind of metafiction in that same way, but it's never used in a way that feels gimmicky. It feels necessary.
Sometimes sometimes it's gimmicky, and that's part of it.
But like, how do you keep those moments from becoming clever for clever's sake, right? Like, how do you make sure that they still have the impact and the hurt in some instances that they have?
You just keep it human, and like the thing about the formal stuff is like, and this is very true of Will's work, where it's like the formal stuff isn't just there because, like, it's not just there to flourish. It's not a flourish for flourish's sake. It's there because it communicates what you're trying to communicate, not just in a new way, but in a more effective way, in a way that only works in comics. And that is the difference between just kind of like, oh, I'm going to do, let's say, a 9 grid for 9 grid's sake, versus like, I'm going to do this thing and I don't really know how it works. So I know very vaguely how it works, but I'm going to put it on everything, versus I'm going to do this way because this story is going to feel different in the reading experience, and Will, like Will doing like the cards or an instruction manual or whatever. And it's like, well, they convey a different feel about these emotions that, the cards is the most obvious one, the Mortal Coil Shuffle that we're promoting, but like, but it really, all of his work is like that, where the gimmick, there is a gimmick, we can call it a gimmick if you want, the structure of the gimmick, but it's there for a purpose. It's not just like, hey, wouldn't it be weird if I did this? It's like, no, this person is going through this. How can I express that through the medium of comics the best way? And sometimes it's just through normal panels, and there is no gimmick. There's plenty of Ice Cream Man issues that are just like normal stories. Maybe not normal, but
yeah, I mean, you catch yourself. I mean, the one thing that, and I think it's because, Ice Cream Man is on issue
853,
whatever, but between like little offshoots and something like we're, probably at like over like 8,000 pages of work.
What's the most important contribution to the Ice Cream Man universe? My 5-page story
yes.
in the Quarantine Comics special, obviously, right?
Wasn't it nominated for an award?
Yeah, it was nominated for an award, yes.
But yeah, I think sometimes it is. I mean, I try not to expose myself too much to talk about my own work, but
Sure.
some people see it as acrobatics, a series of poses that I'm taking. But for me, and I think Dennis is a lot better at masking the acrobatics, where it seems incredibly intentional and sort of held very gently and like, kind of carried along. Whereas mine's a little bit more of like a blunt instrument, like, oh, this is a palindrome. This is very functionally and clinically a child, an experiment.
It's
An experiment happens in labs.
You're drawing attention to it. There's something kind of like Brechtian about it, where it's like you're drawing attention to the fact that like we're doing something with the form here. But I love that. So.
And if you care about stories, even if you find, and for me, a lot of the formal experimentation is just an ADD thing. It's like if I give myself a challenge, I know that I'll finish the script, as opposed to just like, a normal kind of pages 1 to 24 or whatever. Like, that's not as easy for me.
Yeah.
So sometimes I come up with a little impossible puzzle to try to break out of, and it forces me to not just finish, but then you have that second layer. You're saying you don't want it to just be a gimmick. You don't want it to be acrobatics. You want it to feel intentional and human.
And you find stuff in the process, right? Like sometimes it does start from the gimmick, and you find and you build a story around it, and it comes out in the writing. And that's what I tell everybody always, is like a lot of this stuff comes out in the writing for us.
So does that make
narrative and editing? Like,
yeah, that's part of the writing.
But does that make structure a mirror of meaning? Like, are you showing the reflection there in how you're telling the story?
A black mirror of meaning, one might say. Yeah, I mean, that's not. The structure is always defined or is always determined by the story itself. So whether it's you're doing something formally really, really interesting, or you're just cutting between 2 scenes constantly, or you're cutting between 3 scenes, or you're cutting to flashbacks, or whatever it is, like with your decompression in a wreck, right? Where it's like the structure is there's a car crash, and then you're cutting to all these past and future memories. The structure is there to communicate something beyond, like the form has to follow function, right? So it's like the structure is there to communicate something in a way, and some of it is just to fit stuff into spaces, like especially not for Assorted Crisis Events or Ice Cream Man, but like I do kind of the same thing on my Marvel and DC stuff, and especially in the Marvel book Ultimates, like I or even before that, I like sometimes it's just you have 20 pages to work with, and the only way you can fit a lot of story into 20 pages, because I'm a one-shot person. I like each issue being a complete thing, even if it's not done in ones in the way that Ice Cream Man or Ace are. I like it to be. And I like it to have a lot to it, a beginning, middle, and end, in the way that like Sopranos or Mad Men did. And so, so sometimes the structure is just like, how can I get this story in there? Sometimes when you have a little bit more space and a little bit more freedom, which is like one of the things that I love about Assorted Crisis Events and Ice Cream Man, is that there's not really, I mean, there's stories that are weaving throughout, but it's really more of a story engine. It's a space to be able to tell all these different kinds of stories, rather than it is some big story where you have all these characters, and eventually the possibilities kind of narrow down, and you're kind of you're stuck doing this thing because you need to do this transition issue to get to this plot point or whatever. With us, we never have to do that. We have total freedom to just tell the best story possible in the space that we have. And with Image, the space that we have is kind of infinite. I mean, we don't have infinite time.
I was going to interject. Like that's the thing here, is that we're doing it at Image, and there's no one telling you no. There's no one saying, that's a stroke too far. I mean, there are people.
My mom tells me that all the time. But
there are publishers out there approving decks of cards.
Yeah, I mean, exactly.
I mean, hey, like
exactly. When
approaching your publisher and saying, "Hey, I want to do the story as and cards," and to have him go, "Oh, cool, like let's try it."
Okay, so let's jump right into
anywhere else,
right? Like, what made this story in particular, where you're at with Ice Cream Man and what you're wanting to do, feel like, where does that idea come from? And then like walk us through a little bit on how you make that work because you're working in almost a completely different medium now, in doing it with the card deck for the Mortal Coil.
I'm in a card game now. I love comics. I'm a card guy.
So when do the booster packs come out? Is that?
Dude, could you do a blister pack as well, like a blister pack issue where it's just pills? I guess
pack with like blemished,
yeah,
blister, like separating.
yeah.
No, I forget how I even came upon cards. It's one of those things where it just occurred to me, like maybe 2 cards in a row sequentially, how interesting it would be to go from card A to card B. That was enough to sustain months and months of internal research and notebook play, doing all this stuff. I don't know. I think, for Deniz too, like the way he structures stories, I'm not even sure where his come from because they're so complex and different in a largely just different way from me. I'm using sort of very rigid things, structures, frameworks within to tell these stories. But yeah, it's eventually, I don't know how I landed here, but on Wednesday, it almost didn't happen. This thing started, and it was really hard to make and to finish and to produce.
And Will did like a ton of like the thing about Will, and this is why I could never have done something like this, because Will went and like sourced the printer, like who could do this, and like he had all these relationships with all these people, but he also just put in all of this really tedious work to make sure that this thing could happen, and there were other parts of it that they might require him to do, and like a comic book element of it, and he was ultimately able to figure out not to, but like there's just a ton of does a ton of like the nitty gritty, the nitty gritty stuff. His attention to detail is remarkable, and one of
sounds incredibly resourceful too.
Yes, and very resourceful, and like just there's this thing, and my wife is like this, and I'm not like this, where it's like if you see a wall somewhere, or if I see something I see a wall. If my wife sees a wall, she sees potentially a door or a window or whatever. Like she can imagine knocking the wall down and putting something else in there. I cannot. I move around the wall. I'll walk around. Will is the type of person, if he sees a wall, he'll knock it down. Like if he wants to
walk into it
or walk in, right. He'll just keep walking until he makes it through, right?
Like do a pratfall.
Yeah.
I mean, my big secret, which was really what kind of made everything for me, was that I had a full-time job for the first 6 years of Ice Cream Man, 5 years of Ice Cream Man. It was a weird one. I made infographic posters, startup that we kind of became sort of big for a while and sort of shrunk back down. But yeah, I was basically like the COO or director or whatever you want to, just operationally.
The jack off of all trades, you call yourself, right?
I have a history of just like problem solving, like, find a printer, find a this, find a that. So lucky in that, like, production issues are not foreign to me. That when it comes to paper and printing and talking to people and knowing, about stocks and limitations and general pricing and,
and just that also works into the way that you play with like the visual language, how thoughtful you are about the visual language and like the infographic, not that comics aren't infographics, but like the infographic character.
Way that information is conveyed.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, in a way they are information graphics.
Yes.
Right.
Sure. But I mean, everything is sure.
Well, I'll say, okay, but when, so you have the idea
Objects
in your head, you're kicking it around. At what point did it start to click for you and you were like, oh, I can make this work? Like how far did you have to kind of get into the story and doing, kind of laying the cards out a little bit to tell the story where you're like, oh, this is the one. I got it.
Lay your cards out on the table about this role.
There we go.
Here, I've got an ace
up my sleeve.
I don't know.
Are you even wearing sleeves right now? You're a liar. You don't have an ace up your sleeves.
I am in
your
a
short
t-shirt.
sleeves.
We now have to do the entire rest of the podcast using card puns.
I had not lifted above the level of my chest. Though.
Yes. Let's call a spade and just get to it.
There's this can please.
Will's gonna if we get down this path, Will's gonna destroy us all. He is the most clever with this stuff. Sorry, I don't want to get into a fight about this.
I'm not going to be able to focus, and I'm just going to work on card puns.
The card puns. I can see that. What I did was I dropped a little bomb into Will's continuity narrative here, and I'm sorry about that. It's just card.
I mean, this is like, this is also why my wife gets mad at me. Listen, now that you brought up card puns, is all I can think about is, can I drop those into the conversation naturally? I'll just try to get it out of my mind.
Yeah. Put your poker face on. Let's do this.
Yeah, just 3 hearts. The screen. It's making the cards just took a lot of A to B, B to C, C to D, D to E.
Mm-hmm. Alphabet, you're saying.
Just a Darian, which I believe is the right adjective. Yeah, it just took it took sequential flow, and that's a word that Deniz and I use a lot.
Yeah,
when we're talking about things that we're creating, flow is so important. The sentence level, that's at the page turn level, and in this case, I had to figure out what flow was at the card level, which was a compressed amount of information compared to a full page of comics. And then once you get into the area of different kinds of cards and the format starts to kind of warp, you're like, well, how can I work from A to B to C in a way that's, clever and says something and, makes sense and matches up. And so it took just a lot of notebooking.
And when that doesn't work out, you just hack something out because the deadline is coming.
And then you want to, get paid. So no, it's a lot of it is just working on flow. It's like, does this work going to the next spot? And if you get, about halfway down the line, you realize there's a real viability to this. And so, you kind of see it through. There are lots of little exercises like this that I've tried that haven't worked, that I've given up on, or I've changed into a different thing. A lot of it is just like working out that stuff on paper. And in this case, just like we printed cards, and so there were 3 or 4 cards that are different now, but I got to see how it felt, how it was to go from card to card, and the experience and how that kind of worked for me psychologically, what that did to my brain, which is not as strong as it once was. But
I'd love to talk a little bit about pacing, right? Because
so that's the flow again. Yeah,
the flow, right? So I'd love to talk I'd love to dig in a little bit of that more, where in comics or whatever, right? There's that, the turn the page and boom, cool big splash page or whatever, or the final panel of a story that's cliffhanger or whatever. But sometimes there will be big action set pieces in a book, and it can feel a little light and breezy, but then but depending on where it is in the book, you may sit with it a little bit longer. And so, turning each card is not is similar to turning a page, but for Ice Cream Man in particular, is so good at that, oh shit kind of moment. How do you make sure that that's preserved kind of in the deck of cards, that you don't necessarily wait too long or do it too early?
That's, for me at least, I don't know, for Deniz, it kind of jumps back to what we talked about in terms of weakness and vulnerability, which is that is that stuff still present in in every step of this thing. It is, is their intent and humanity layered into card A to B and B to C and C to D? And if, you know, uh, and does it seem like someone writing a story, or does it feel like someone telling a story or writing a story? When someone tells you a story, you're sitting with them, they're kind of, you know, talking to you about their life. When someone writes a story, it can feel, you know, sometimes you want the writer to be invisible, sometimes you don't. Often, you that's the goal. The writer should be invisible, not always. But yeah, it's just like, can the format hold up emotion? Can the format hold in it a humanness that I want to maintain in every single issue of the series?
Will, this is something that I like. I haven't used the cards yet. I just read through the PDF, but something that I thought would be interesting is it different in the feel is this to actually have the cards and to lay them out requires a lot more engagement from the reader than a comic book does, because it's much more difficult. Like, they're in order, you have to take each one, put them down. So it's like, it feels like you are getting something where people would be like, it's a bigger ask, like, to sit down and do it, but it's also like building stories or something more engaging, because it's asking all comics ask for the participation of the reader in some way. That's what the gutters are and whatnot. But this in particular feels like it asks for more engagement from the reader, and in that way, I think has the potential to be much more immersive, because it's like you're actually physically doing a lot more, and it takes a little bit more of action from you than like quickly flipping the pages of whatever.
And again, not to like try intentionally to complete the circle here, but we're talking about trying to bridge consciousness, right, and get out of the prison of the self, and try to understand 10% of what it means to be in someone else's shoes, to see through someone else's eyes. And so there's just a lot of thought about like, what would a person feel like holding a deck of cards? Would they be inclined to, consider it even a story? Would they be compelled to go like this? Or is it, how does it feel to me, how does it feel? And then I try to imagine, this is a tactile experience. How would it feel to my daughter? How would it feel to, you know, uh, someone else? And you don't know, but
Right.
these are considerations that you're taking in, and that lead to you, sort of making final decisions about content and format and the ways that they sort of meet. For this one, there was, almost an over consideration of, is this a way someone wants to take in a story, or are they willing to emotionally engage with a deck of cards? And I found that it was big enough, and then once I got into the nitty gritty of the writing, realized that there was actually almost like an experiential magic to it. That they're just the right size and just the right to kind of still be a comic, being absolutely not.
Right. So just to be clear, there is one way to read this, and it is in order, the order of the cards that come in the pack.
Yes, dude.
If you play 52 card pickup and mix them around.
They're numbered though, so it's
they're
like
numbered.
they're really easy to get it.
Drop them.
Yeah.
But yeah, they come in the deck in order. And I have like instructions on the pack, like don't shuffle them. You have to read them in order, 1 to 55, and they're numbered.
Can you give us a bit about what this story in particular is about?
Cards. Done.
It is.
You're welcome.
It is about. It is. So it's an inside joke, really, just to Deniz, and nothing that the reader understands. But it's a house of cards. And it's collapsing.
Absolutely.
And so it is, making the metaphor literal, which is kind of one of the little tricks that I like to do with all of my writing, especially Ice Cream Man. So this is a house falling apart. This is just on the brink. Everyone sort of going in opposite. This small family, but everyone with sort of distinct concerns and personalities. And the House of Cards, as you go through the cards, really does sort of fall apart. And it's really simple story. It's very sort of linear, and that it's
broad though, because it's there's so many characters, not broad in like the artistic sense. Broad is in like there's a lot of different characters that you're following in this house. You're following each one of them, and you're
jumps around how you're telling this. It's complicated.
A business card will break your heart in this one, is what I would say. Like there's a business card in here that will break your heart. So
actually, I had a neighbor the other day that was reading through it and read the second card, which is like a take on a Magic the Gathering card. And so for these cards, I tried to write them in the style of Magic cards. I wasn't a big Magic guy, but I started to read a lot of Magic cards, see how they were written, and what they communicated to the players. Some of them are a lot more than they are like narrative. But so those ones are written differently than like the narrative cards, which are like the kind of meat of the deck, which is these little, comic book pictures with text both on the page and underneath it.
But there's credit cards, there's business cards, there's Uno card, not Uno cards. There's not Uno cards.
But I had my neighbors. I guess she
stuck a reverse card in there, and then you had to read the story backwards and then go forward.
Then read the book. Read it.
Have you not read the?
Read it.
Have you not read the deck, man?
I have not yet. I'm waiting for the
PDF. Yeah,
I can't read it in a PDF.
So then you hit this card.
You're off camera. Your hand is off camera.
Is it really?
Yes.
It's in my.
You're still off camera. Go in the middle. Going more in the middle.
It's in my camera.
There it is.
There it is. Yeah, we've got it divided up a little bit, but yeah, there it's.
And then so
it is there.
But it's not Uno for it's not Uno for copyright reasons, but it is something.
Then the cards are not just in reverse, but are also reversed.
Oh.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
You'll see. Let's not spoil it. You'll see.
No. Don't spoil the whole thing. Now it's
But so I wanted to finish this. Like my neighbor like read the Magic card and was like, "Whoa!" And it was just like a kind of evidence of like how much you could have. It was it verified to me that it reassured me that this was a good idea because she had read just one card. Holy cow!
You're by the way, you're split on the screen. So you got only half a face. It was very artistic. It looked very artistic.
I think you just used two different words in a row and they were both right.
It is comics.
But yeah, so the second card, is about they're leaving a family, but it's written in the style of the Magic the Gathering game, as if you were playing a game. So it speaks very sort of, first it speaks intimately and narratively about the father, and then it speaks sort of mathematically and distances itself. For the preview was already up. After you read a little bit about the father leaving, in italics it says, "You were minus one father." So he was never really there, was he? So this idea that you're playing a game, you are minus one father. You are plus 3 health.
Will is really a lovely person in person, and I want people to know that, because I feel his work, his work might imply that he's troubled in some kind of way, and I'm not saying he's not troubled, but he really is very lovely and positive in person.
Yeah, I'm a goofball day to day.
Yeah,
I don't. I just.
But he has his,
But yeah, I'm not a dark guy. I keep that for the book only.
I gotta let you guys go in a little bit, but I have to ask this question before I do so. Where
Also, wait, Assorted Crisis Events also out this week.
Yeah,
And
that's why I was trying to
there's
please everyone read it. It's the best book in comics.
no, but it is.
And then if you're a superhero reader, you should go read Absolute and Manhunter. It's the best DC book. If you're a Marvel person, you should go read Ultimates. It's the best Marvel book. If you read comics, if you're looking for the best book from one of the top 3 publishers, just look for the name Deniz Camp, and you will get the best of what's coming out right now.
No, that's very sweet.
The question I've got to ask is, almost none of this is possible for what you guys are doing, both in Assorted and Ice Cream Man, without your artists in this. And
Thank you.
so
yes,
I need to know what those, obviously, like, you've worked with both of them enough now that like they know what they've gotten themselves into. But how did you trick them to getting them into the boat with you and continue down the river?
You want to go, Dennis? I feel like I've been talking too much.
Oh yeah, sure. I've been friends with Eric, who drew this cover and also the interiors of every issue. And he is we've been friends for years and years, and we met like at a New York Comic-Con, and it was one of these things where you go to these, and this is the same thing I have with Will, where it's like you go to these conventions and like there's a lot of people there, and a lot of them really want to talk about stuff that I'm not particularly interested in, like the business side of the work, or how much money they made on this, or whatever. And with Will and with Eric, I found myself much more engaged because we were talking about things that I was interested in, like craft and the nitty gritty of making comics. And so Eric is an upset, is a real formalist. He loves the medium of comics. And so I always wanted to work with him, but he was a little ahead of me in the industry. Like he had more success early on. And so we were just friends because it just didn't make sense for him to work on anything with me. And I wasn't ready. And then, eventually I came up with this story, Assorted Crisis Events, and I thought, or this concept, and I was really excited about it because I had been looking for something that was like a story engine that would allow me to tell all these different stories in new ways, much like Ice Cream Man, and so and I said that to Eric, and he was like, "No, I'm good." And so I just kept writing it anyway, and thinking about like, well, who would be an artist for this? Because I want it to be highly formal. I want it to be highly structured. That was something that I thought could be fun in the book. And then Eric sent me like a mood board of stuff to work on, like for another project, and I started working on that for him. But then as time went on, he was hearing more and more about what ultimately would become Assorted Crisis Events, and he was like, actually, I want to go back to that. I want to do that. So he knew what he was getting into, in the sense that we had been talking. We would sit and talk for a long time about like particular panels and the way that the language worked and what you could do with comics. And so I knew that he was right for this book, and I could write this book. Once he signed on, I could write this book in a way that really played to his strengths as an artist, and it was a big risk, and and it's paid off for him in the end. But it really, when we started, it was not a good like I said before, it was really not a smart decision to agree to do this, and it turned out okay then. So
he's brilliant, by the way. I mean, those layouts, that's
insane.
Yeah, Martine, I mean, we're kind of geriatric in the world of comics at this point. Like, I guess we've been working together for really over 10 years at this point.
Right, because of Art Brut.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so he is, I don't know.
Also out from Image.
I don't know when he became comfortable with me emailing a script.
Still
or a description. I know he started to get more and more scared as I started to kind of like stretch more and more and be like, well, let's maybe do this. But he is a creative superior to me, and his ability to not just match my wacky ideas, but to and also Chris, the colorist, to exceed my expectations for them and to get it so quickly, and then to better it as well.
Elevate, right? Like everybody elevates it. Yeah.
If you can find that kind of collaborator, like you're so lucky. And like everyone is going to say this about their collaborator because you have to, but like it's just not true for every collaborator.
Yeah.
But there are some people in your lives who, when you write, they draw, you write, or they color, you write, or you write, they write, and you draw, whatever. It's you're just again. So maybe full circle. This is going back to a frequency thing. You guys are tunes into this same small little space no one else can seem to find or understand. And so Martine and I sort of lived in that space together where maybe we weren't there at first, but it doesn't surprise him when I'm like, hey, like I thought about an issue as a deck of cards. And he's like, oh yeah, then you could have other types of cards. And I was like, that's exactly it, Martine. That's what I was getting at. And so we just speak the same language now. Wasn't always that way, but I mean, 40 of issues in, plus all these little side things, plus Art Brute. It's just an immense amount of work I've done with the two of them. So very lucky to have people that are up for the challenge because it starts as a challenge for me. And then the next challenge is a challenge for them.
Exactly.
Then the final challenge is the challenge for the reader. A little bit of a challenge for the publisher too, to convince stores to buy something that isn't floppy paper. But it's just these series of baton passings and of propositions.
Every issue is like that. Every member of the team is like that too. For Assorted Crisis Events, like I feel compelled to mention Jordy and Haas, the colorist and the letterer. Like every person adds something, and so you end up with something that's much stronger than it would have been if it would just been you dictating everything. But you need to find those people who are willing to put their creativity and their effort into it, and to do something that you didn't say to do in the script per se. That works. That is in the spirit of what you're doing.
Yeah, a person who's confident enough to make unilateral decisions for the sake of the story, not for themselves.
Exactly.
They're honoring the story and the reader and respecting it in the same way that you are. So they're not making a unilateral change because they want a stamp on it. They're making it because they're like, I see a way here to pack a bigger punch, to
make it more interesting.
Make a more interesting story for the reader. And that's what everything is at the end, is like, what is this thing that you're passing on to a person who spends X amount of minutes with you reading it? Like, what are you giving them? What is the proposition? They pay money that they work hard for to read your books. So you should constantly have that in mind when of what I'm putting of myself into the work, because it's really not just a small thing to read comics. I mean, especially now, I'm sure a lot of people have slimmed their pull lists down to something shorter than it used to be. Inflation, tariffs, all this stuff. But
is there something going on in the country? I don't know.
Not much if you're on our side of the fence. Not enough, certainly. But yeah, so you want to honor the reader, and you want to give them something good to read, because they work hard jobs themselves, and they
even just the attention
are using this as they are using this as time.
Just the time that it takes to read a comic, the time that the people dedicated to the engagement, especially our work. Kind of, I mean, I don't mean this to be the case, but all the time I hear that my work is like challenging, or that you need to be like in a space to read it, and like, because it takes a lot out of you. And I don't mean it for that to be true, but I guess it is. And so it's like, I agree, it's a huge honor.
Have each of you ever thought for the sake of it to just write like a super breezy issue of each of your books?
I couldn't bring myself to do that. Even on the stuff that I don't own, I just can't. And I've tried. I really have tried. I've thought about it. I was like, well, wouldn't it be nice if there was like nothing else to this except a fun fight or something? And it's like, you just physically are unhappy. You're just unhappy. I'm just unhappy. So
I mean, yeah, I don't really have the ability to do it. I am working on a project where historically that is what would be required of me.
that would be fun.
Is to write a breezy story. But that's the
But
reason I was hired was because they don't want to go in that direction. But
Will had like was the kind of guy where he did an issue that was like a kind of a Figgly Bumps issue, a Dr. Seuss issue, and somehow it became about suicide. So I think that I really think that says it all. Where it was like these lovely little creatures, and it became about war and suicide. So
yeah,
that was his breezy issue.
You can try, but the self
Comes
goes
out.
up. Yeah. He's inside there. So
love it. Guys, thank you so much for your time today. This has been a ton of fun. I could do this a million times over, and we probably should do this again sometime.
Yeah.
Because this was fun. But for those listening, depending on when you're listening to it, Ice Cream and the Mortal Coil and Assorted Crisis Events number 6 are on sale this week, November 5th. If you're listening to this after the fact, I'm sure you can find these books somewhere in some form or fashion, whether it's a trade collection. I mean, not the card deck. Card deck you're going to have to go get the card deck for.
We'll see how it goes. Hopefully everyone gets one. And if not, certain promises were made that we might unpromise.
We may have to revisit.
I hope everyone gets to read it. That's my hope.
I mean, look, here's the thing that I'm excited for is that I hope that someone comes in who may not be reading Ice Cream Man, but sees what is available this week and says, I'm going to give it a shot. Right. And instead of coming in on what would be a quote regular issue of the comic, or coming in this way and then maybe experience the book well,
that's the beauty. That's the beauty of Ice Cream Man, and I think Ace, if I could be so bold, is like any issue can be somebody's first issue, and you can jump in anywhere. And if you liked, you'll get everything you need out of this one deck of cards to enjoy an issue or whatever. And then you can literally, if you can't find issue 1, it doesn't matter. Just of Ice Cream Man, just go in and pick up issue 23 or issue 16 or whatever. Like,
and a lot of that comes down to what it turns out are the people fully in charge of my livelihood, which are the comic shop employees that hand sell and recommend.
Yeah.
If you're able to create a book that someone else says, oh, like you should try this out. And I think both Dennis and I have been lucky enough to make books that comic store employees connect with them in certain ways, especially because they love comics themselves and understand what a challenging comic is. And it's
and how beautiful it can be. Yeah, absolutely.
So someone in the store is going to say, "Hey, I know you're a Marvel guy or whatever, but like I also know you play cards. I know you're a poker guy. You got to check out this thing."
There's a community thing too.
Those are the people that are just like you rely on, like the people in the shops that are picking you up.
Our biggest advocates, the whole reason that we've been able to have careers, absolutely, is because of the belief. I mean, you have to keep in mind, like when you're starting out, you really have no name recognition. So there's no one is going to pick up your book. There's way too many books, especially when I was starting out. So it's like that. It was really, really 100% word of mouth from store, shop owners and people who had read the PDFs beforehand. That have whether it's 20th Century Man or Assorted Crisis Events or my earlier stuff, Agent of World, etc. Like it really was like people who love comics a lot and have this sense of community. They've created this sense of community in their community. The best shops are have this really great sense of community where everybody kind of knows each other and it's beautiful. It's beautiful to be a part of that, and we're I think both really grateful for that.
Sure.
Well, guys, thank you again, and we'll catch up soon.
Absolutely. Thank you. Peace.
Big thank you to Will Prince and Deniz Camp for spending time with us this week on Let's Talk Comics. I wanted to do an episode like this because so much what we talk about on the show is how community is such an important part of working in comics. And when I found out how great of friends Dennis and Will were, it felt like the right opportunity to kind of bring those two on and show how, how great it is to have a support network around you that helps you understand what you're trying to do and what you want to do and do all that. And so I think we absolutely got that. And then on top of that, we got some insight into how the two of them approach their books and how kind of complementary they may be to one another. So if you haven't yet, make sure you pick up Ice Cream Man, the Mortal Coil, pick up Assorted Crisis Events. And as always, thank you for spending time with us. We always appreciate your support. And if you haven't yet, please head on over to iTunes, leave us a 5-star review, leave us a 5-star rating over on Spotify, share a comment on Spotify, share it in a Discord, share it in a Facebook group. And as always, just keep reading comics. Because if you keep reading them, we'll keep talking about them. We'll catch you later, folks.